Hello, my name is Mark Hunter. You may have attended one of our contractors classes or webinars. Construction is a noble profession and the backbone of many communities. I've met thousands of contractors and each one got into the business to build projects, not to hassle with paperwork. Here are 3 of the major risk issues that contractors are facing today. Many contractors I meet are shocked to learn that they can be sued for so-called construction defects many years after the project is completed. The statute of repose or limitations in most states is 10 years after the project is finished. Yes, this means that you could be sued for things like water intrusion or structural defects for years after the project has been turned over to the owner. Contracts are a key aspect to managing risk for construction professionals. You have a contract with the owner, which in many cases requires that you contractually transfer risks to your subcontractors and to their sub-tier subs, etc. We recently reviewed a prime contract that obligated a GC to require their subs to provide the same protections to the owner as the prime contract afforded, including a $5 million insurance policy and proper additional insured endorsements to protect the owner. The GC was in breach of contract because they didn't understand and comply with the agreement. Insurance policies add an additional layer of complexity. Some insurance companies now include so-called independent contractor warranty provisions. These relatively new provisions include the requirement to not only obtain a properly written and executed subcontract agreement that contains hold harmless indemnification language, but also requires that the GC is additionally insured on the subcontractor's insurance for both ongoing and completed operations. Simply being listed on a certificate of insurance just is not good enough anymore. What can further complicate matters is the requirement that the subcontractor's policy actually cover them for their scope of work performed. It sounds simple, but it isn't. Insurance policies are generic in nature. They don't sell a plumbing policy or a drywall policy, so it often falls to the GC to review sub's insurance coverage and assess whether or not the policy does in fact cover the type of work the sub is performing. If you fail to follow these new complex rules, it can be bad, really bad. A general contractor recently told us about his experience with this type of policy provision. He carefully collected and retained certificates of insurance from all of his subcontractors, and when he was audited, he proudly handed over the binder of certificates to his insurance auditor. The auditor then asked to review some of his executed subcontract agreements to ensure proper risk transfer. The GC emphatically told the auditor that under no circumstances has he or would he make his subs sign a subcontract agreement. After all, they'd been working together for years, he trusted his subs, and they all worked together on a handshake. That was good enough for him. The auditor checked some boxes, went on his way, and a few weeks later the GC received a bill for an extra $63,000 in premium because he had failed to comply with the independent contractor warranty provision that was contained in his policy. Construction defect litigation seems to increase every year. One of the ways that insurance companies have attempted to limit their exposure is by including policy exclusions for some of the most common types of claims. Exclusions themselves aren't new, but in many policies today, more things are excluded than covered. Consider a few examples of exclusions that eliminate coverage to either the GC or the GC subcontractor. An outright residential exclusion, or a tract housing work exclusion, multifamily exclusion, a soil subsidence exclusion, meaning there's no coverage for any earth movement for any major earth collapse, as well as settling issues or shifting issues that could happen. And it's been estimated that roughly 80% of construction defect lawsuits include some type of claim as it relates to soils issues. Exclusions for injury lawsuits brought by a subcontractor's employees. A prior work and ongoing and progressive damage exclusions. Height limitations, which are very common. For example, one GC we worked with was building 4-story apartment buildings and was shocked to find out that one of his roofers had no coverage on the liability policy because he had a common 3-story coverage limitation. And then how about the electrical contractor who regularly worked on large custom homes, but whose liability policy contained an exclusion for any work on homes over 5,000 square feet? Or an exterior painting contractor's policy that we reviewed, which excluded all coverage for wind drift and overspray. So he accidentally oversprayed 100 cars next to the apartment building he was painting. There would be no coverage to cover those vehicles that were oversprayed. We recently saw a denied claim for a plumber who worked on townhouse projects, but had a townhome exclusion on his policy. With the ever-growing list of exclusions, some states have taken action. For example, the state of Utah now can suspend a contractor's license if their insurance policy does not cover their scope of work. As a GC, your sub's exclusions can ultimately become your problem. If their insurance won't pay, who will? Your policy may contain similar exclusions, leaving no coverage at all. Perhaps worst of all, certificates of insurance, the primary tool contractors have relied on for years, don't say anything about insurance exclusions. Sadly, many insurance agents don't actually understand what they're selling. They just focus on limits and premiums and then move on to the next sale. When was the last time your insurance agent actually went through each and every policy exclusion, examining every detail and explaining it to you? How about reviewing your subcontract agreement to discuss best practice standards? My point in this video wasn't to freak you out. The good news is that there are solutions. We've worked with thousands of contractors all over the country. Our success comes from performing the deep dive that agents won't do. We look at the entire policy, including exclusions, review your contracts, and help determine your true exposure based on the type of work that you do. If we find problems with your authorization, of course, we can work directly with your insurance company to fix them. We also will discuss potential contractual issues as well as best practice standards and insurance language and subcontract agreements. While we don't provide legal advice, there is much that can be done from a risk management and risk transfer standpoint. We've helped hundreds of general contractors reduce risk and save money. Just listen to one of our many success stories.
We met Mark with Summit Risk Management while taking some continuing education classes for our contractor's license. The class was enlightening. We're a multi-generation, family-run general contractor. We've always carried general liability insurance. We were collecting our certificates of insurance from all of our subcontractors. So imagine our surprise to learn that what we really had was just a piece of paper with the sub's info on it and a whole lot of potential risk. After that class, we ended up meeting Mark to do a comply check review of our contracts and our insurance policy. We found items in our master agreement with the phone company that left the possibility of being in breach of contract, specifically because of our subcontractors' lack of insurance. Since then, we've been working with Mark and his team at Summit to shore up our insurance and work on our subcontract agreements to comply with our master agreement. We've also got my cert set up to make the process of managing those certificates of insurance a lot easier. It also helps us identify if there's any exclusions from the sub's insurance that would put us at risk. Mark is passionate about how to mitigate liability risk for his clients. I would suggest a simple comply check to anyone. Even if you have an attorney, they might overlook the insurance requirements and especially those exclusions. We thought we were covered, but now we know we are.
Finally, we'll introduce you to a low-cost automated system called GotMyCerts.com that helps simplify the certificate of insurance and coverage verification process between you and your subcontractors. Contact us today to take advantage of our no-cost, no-obligation service. You'll be happy you did. Thank you.